So the Stranglers were formed in 1974 under the name the Guildford Stranglers, though none of them came from Guildford. I guess that this was some kind of homage to the Boston Stranglers. But they dropped the Guildford bit after a while, after not very long actually, and just became the Stranglers. They were formed effectively from a blues guitarist, a classical guitarist, a jazz drummer, and a guy who played keyboards in military bases in Germany. And they used ice cream vans as tour buses in the early days, basically because their drummer owned a fleet of ice cream vans. In about 1976, they fell in with punk, so they became quite strongly associated with punk. Musically, they weren't quite as raw as punk, but they became part of that scene, and they've kept going ever since. They've had a continuous existence and are still going. They got more sophisticated and maybe more poppy over time. They've had quite a turnover of people, and of the original people, only the bassist has left. But a couple of them didn't leave that long ago, actually. And they've had around about 20 albums in that time. The other thing of interest is they have an association with rats. So this is their second album. And how would you describe the music? It's not quite punk. It's kind of punk, but it's not quite as raw as that. But it's not quite as slick as new wave either. It's somewhere in between. I kind of feel like I want to mention the Jam here as a very similar sound in some ways. It's tight and it's got lots of space in it. It's kind of empty at times, and the kind of defining characteristics are that there's a strong focus on the bass, and there's a really interesting bass sound here. It's quite crunchy, and there's a lot of kind of high-pitched tones in there, and the organ, kind of rock organ sound, which is somewhat unusual for this kind of music as well. And yeah, so it's like that, and I would say it's kind of, it's not particularly thrashy, except maybe occasionally. There are tiny hints here of dub and two-tone that's to come, which is kind of where punk morphed into in some ways. As for the songs themselves, they're quirky, but there's an anger to them, but also a sense of humour. There's some quite odd songs in here. Some of it's quite satirical at times. There's No More Heroes, which is obviously the name of the album, which is a really well-known song. I didn't know any of the other songs on the album. The first song is I Want to Be a Beep, and apparently it's satirical. They claim they're not always understood in their ways that they're satirical. There's another song about nubiles, which is Bring on the Nubiles. And again, apparently they're claiming they're satirical here. For me, the best song was the last song on the album called School Ma'am. It's quite odd in its content. There's some social commentary in here, but there's just stuff about life and stuff about all sorts of things. There's some naughty words, so watch out for those. And it's interesting because there's 3 different singers, but it still manages to keep a very coherent sound, despite quite a variety in the songs and the way they're approached. And I think that this is really down to the fact that the bass sound and the organ sound are quite consistent throughout. So I found it pleasing and interesting. I enjoyed listening to it. I found it quite intelligent. It has a kind of sticking two fingers up at the world's attitude. So it's a bit rude, which yeah, there's a little bit of a rebel in there that I enjoyed.
Productivity. Credibility. Impossibility.